So imagine that there's a behavioral space where evolutionary competition between strategies occurs. And we've already agreed on the fact that the strategies that are going to work consistently across time in a social organization are going to be functions of iterated reciprocal interactions. They have to be, because that's what defines a society. Okay, so now imagine those are all laid out through behavioral cooperation and competition. Okay, now imagine you have a mapping function and you can map those strategies. That's what a story is. Okay, now imagine those stories have levels of generality and specificity, right? And so if you told your story, it would be specific to your time and place and the conditions of your life, but it would also be a variant of a broader story that people could rely on to orient themselves in conditions that were somewhat similar to yours. There's a whole hierarchy of those. So I would say the deepest and most general stories are we define them as the religious stories. And translating them into their specific application is actually quite a complex act, right? It's like you can take a general heuristic, which would be coded as a narrative, and it might not be obvious to you how to apply that to the conditions of your life. That's a problem you have to solve. But that doesn't mean it's not without worth, because it's a great starting place.
It occurs, I don't know if this analogy is appropriate, but I think what you're describing is the changing of the sort of dynamic moving of the boundary between order and chaos as you proceed down the level of specificity from the general to the specific. So actually what's happening there is the same thing as the antibody, is the boundary is moving. The boundary is getting closer and closer to the target. And I think,
yeah, definitely. Well, yeah. And in some ways too, the target might also becoming clearer and clearer, right? Because you imagine that's happening in two ways, right? Because it's happening, you're trying to minimize the distance between you and the target, but you're also trying to minimize the ambiguity in relationship to the target as you move towards
it. Get rid of the noise. You're trying to get rid of
the perceptual noise, exactly, and that is a matter of zeroing in, which is basically how we describe it, and. Yeah.
That's how bees rank order. They rank order flower beds based on the frequency of bees coming back from flower bed and saying this is a flower bed of value, which they communicate in a pretty sophisticated manner. And so what they're actually doing is, they start in the morning and they leave the hive and they fly around, and it's random. They don't know where the flower beds are. And then throughout the day, different bees identify different flower beds that have more nectar and less nectar. And then they come back and they communicate that they found a flower bed and that there's nectar there. And then the hive redirects the sacrifice to the most valuable flower bed based on the value, the amount of value in each individual flower bed. So what ends up happening is you create a hierarchy from the general to the specific. It's sort of a Pareto distribution is what it is, where you're targeting the sacrifice more and more and more algorithmically to the highest value.
Right. Okay. And so let's walk through that. So it's random to begin with because the bees go in every direction. Okay. Now some bees come back and report. Now I think you told me that the length of the dance of the individual bee is proportionate to the store that they're trying to indicate. And so then the human equivalent to that would be like, if I watch you put a lot of time and effort into convincing me of something, it's going to be more convincing because what you're doing is indicating by your sacrificial action, which is your dumping of time and effort into that attempt, that's your commitment to the goal. And so that's a pretty valid indication, at least of your estimation of how valuable that goal is.
Yeah, well, I mean, the dance, if you watch the Sugar Plum Fairies, the dance increases in the level of excitement to indicate the procession towards value, right? So I think that's what you're just is that what you're describing?
Yeah, well, you want to think about how bees would indicate to each other the reliability of the message, and it's got to be something like that the bee. A bee that's willing to risk a lot of effort in the dance has obviously found a source of energy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's actually more precise than that. So there's sort of three. So this guy von Frisch got the Nobel Prize for discovering this in like 1973, and what he discovered are three different elements of how bees encode the location of value in a language. I mean, their dance is really a sort of a proto language, and what they do is they find a flower bed, they gorge themselves on nectar, so they're covered in pollen and nectar. So one telltale sign of a valuable flower bed is that bee actually comes up and he throws up in the middle of the hive, and so he's just covered in flower smell. And then he does a dance, and there are two aspects of the dance that actually create a vector. One is the length of the dance, and it's extraordinarily precise. So the length of the dance, every second, I think, represents about 1,000 meters. So a 1 second dance says the flower bed is 1,000 meters away. The curvature from the bee sort of goes in a straight line, and then he curves back to the start. The curvature of his dance indicates the direction of the flower bed as an angle off of the direction of the sun. I mean, it's unbelievably sophisticated. So the bee reads the hive, he looks up at the sun, he says, okay, this bee just told me the flower bed is 45 degrees off the angle of the sun. So go east, 1,000 meters. And yeah, it's unbelievable. So then what I don't know that this part is true. I'm sort of guessing here, but then I think what probably happens is that because that flower bed is so valuable and because there's so much nectar there, more and more bees come back.
Right.
And they dance. And so that creates a hierarchy, right? There are more and more bees that are dancing. And
attract more attention. I wonder if they get more precise in their specification too as further exploration occurs.
Probably. It's probably a weighted average of all the bees coming back and doing a very similar dance that tells you where the flower bed is. And so they ultimately direct their sacrifice in a highly intelligent algorithmic way.
And the sacrifice is their willingness to expend energy, right? When we talk about sacrifice, here's the bees burn up energy flying around. So that's the sacrifice.
Yeah. Well, another thing this von Frisch figured out, which this is even more fascinating, is that bees can lie. So you can have cane bees and able bees, and a cane bee will come back and do a dance, but not be covered in pollen, and not have found that valuable of a flower bed.
So it's a virtue signaling bee.
He's a virtue signaling bee. Yeah. And the other bees will pay less attention if you don't smell, if you don't have sort of highly potent flower smells.
I wondered, did von Frisch figure out why a bee would falsify his report? I mean, the obvious answer is for attention, but it's not easy to translate that into the bee world.
Yeah, I don't know that we know that part, but
narcissists, those are narcissist bees, by the way.
Postmodernist bees.
Yeah. Yeah, they signal for treasure when none exists.
Right. Well, I mean, this tells you a lot, right? Because the postmodernists think that there's no hierarchy. It's just all made up, and we can sort of invent whatever hierarchy we want to. Well, bees can find value, right? So it's so deep in nature that if bees can do it, well, human beings can damn well do it.
Right. Well, and I would bet my bottom dollar that the systems that are activated when a bee watches another bee dance in a particularly motivated way are mediated by dopamine. It's highly probable, right? Because that's conserved so far down.
Yeah. I bet you're right. And so it's going. They have all kinds of interesting behaviors. I mean, when a hornet comes in and starts trying to take bees, they scream. They literally scream predator threat, and so they have behavioral patterns that are prey and predator. I mean, going and finding the flower is a predatory behavior. It's value constructing. They're creating.
Right.
When the
value hierarchy.
Yeah, when the bear comes, that's a predatory threat to the bee. They create chaos.
Right. Around to disrupt the goal-seeking behavior of the predator.
And so the level of actually they sort of balance level of chaos and order depending on the situation. So when a hornet comes to the nest, what they'll actually do is a highly almost hyper ordered dance. They surround the hornet, and all the bees around the hornet start beating their wings in synchronous fashion, and they raise the temperature so they can survive at, I don't know, like 106 degrees, and hornets die at 104 degrees. So it's the same thing.
Right. So they like a fever.
Yeah, it's a fever.
Wow, that's amazing.
Isn't that amazing?
Right. They cook the wasps, eh?
They cook the wasps. They literally cook the wasps without cooking themselves. Right. So that's right on the border of chaos. And
right.
It's perfect management, right on. It's like the peak of a Beethoven symphony or something.